Mr Cenz is an artist known for his large-scale freestyle murals and paintings. Often depicted high on the side of a building, the subjects peer out against a background of abstract swirls and colours. Taking influence from his background in graffiti, the work is spontaneous and instinctive. The end result, a kind of futuristic ideal that peers out into the world around. This is Art-Related Noise.
Started experimenting with painting.
There's so many avenues with art.
We're surrounded by images.
Just being lost in this sea of possibility.
Announcing that I was going to be an artist.
It brings the work I do alive even more.
They could be part of this work as well.
Everyone's got their own personal connection to something.
Hello and welcome to Art-Related Noise, the podcast of the Enter Gallery in Brighton. My name's Stuart from Inspiring City and I'm with Mr Cenz. Hello. Do I call you Mr Cenz?
Yeah, that's fine.
Where did it come from, that name?
Back in the graffiti days, I used to write Cenz.
And that's C-E-N-Z.
C-E-N-Z. So, and that was just purely because I like the letters, you know. A lot of tags, people think that there's big meanings behind them, but actually there's not. So, sorry to disappoint, but it was just something that I had lots of tags, and I used to write Cents before, actually Cents, but I used to do it with a C instead of an S, instead of S-E-N-S-E. I used to do it with C's, so I just changed it to Cenz. I really enjoyed writing the letters. Yeah, that's it. Just you stick with it. You know, it comes a point in time you have to stick with your tag.
Is that all it is then? It's just like playing around with...
Yeah, some people might have meanings, but generally it's just words that, you know, people like the way the letters flow and the letters look, basically, when they're doing their hand style.
And did it take a while to like come up with that combination of letters then, or do you remember
Yeah. Well, I was always playing around. You know, when we were young, that's what we did in school all day long, just scribbling in the back of my books, doing hand styles, trying out different tags. So then the Mr kind of added on when I kind of went legit and started doing more kind of murals and more studio-based stuff. I thought I'd put the Mr on there, sound a bit more sophisticated.
to appear posh, to
exactly. Yeah,
from the graffiti streets.
No, there was also someone else. There was a German writer who was doing pieces under the name Cenz as well. So I thought I want to be completely original. That was the main thing, actually. I didn't want to have the same name as someone else, so I just thought I'd put the Mr on.
So is that when you're starting back in school and you're playing around with those tags and you're writing about did you have it in your mind that you wanted to go into graffiti at that time, or did you even know what graffiti was?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, this was I first discovered graffiti when I was like 8 years old. You know, so I was pretty established in what graffiti was by that time, and I was always into art. So once I discovered graffiti art at a very young age, that's what I wanted to do. That was it for me. I'm one of those people that I've always known that I wanted to be an artist, and then when graffiti came along, that was my path. I didn't give a shit about any other subject. All I cared about was getting enough GCSEs to get to art college to continue my path to be a professional artist. I knew that I was blessed to have that.
And what was the trigger? What was it that you must have seen something or felt something at the time to give you that impetus?
Well, as I say, I was always into art anyway, you know, and I was taken to a lot of galleries by my parents. But traditional art, there was no real movement that really kind of compelled me until I saw which we call the Graffiti Art Bible, Subway Art, which was like 1983, I think. So
it was early, wasn't it?
Yeah, early. So when I saw those subway trains and those colours and the movement, that was it. That blew my mind. I thought that's what I want to do. You know, I want to learn the art of the spray can. I want to do that, and that was it. That was it, really. You know?
And how did you first come across that book? What do you remember when you first came across it?
Well, I had an older cousin who was into breaking and stuff like that, so I was aware there was stuff going on. Obviously, in my local area, I was aware of tags and stuff happening and local crews, you know. So I was already kind of playing around with graffiti before that. So I was aware of it, but I was never aware of the extent of what was being done, you know, across the pond. It really, really blew my mind, and obviously it came at the same time as the music, you know, hip hop, because it was all one culture. You know, you couldn't separate. You know, there was breaking, you know, MCing, DJing. You know, it was a whole package. So they were one thing. Combined with the music and the rest of the culture, it was just blew us all away. You know, everybody was into it. in primary school when it first came over. You know, because I was into art, I was like, oh, right, that's what I'm going to do. And then there was people who were more physical; they were doing the breaking, and so it's one of those things, one of those cultures where everybody could be involved.
Sounds like a bit of a moment in time, particularly here in South London, which is where I think you were born. You're certainly raised in South London.
Yeah.
It sounds like a moment in time that was quite special. There's a lot going on, a lot of energy going on.
Oh,
creativity.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. You know, and hip hop was on the back of obviously all the punk stuff and the mod stuff. So that musically and culturally, it was amazing time. You know? It really was. You know, think about it now, it's like wow. We were so lucky to be a 70s and 80s child for sure, man. You know.
Well, it's the beginning of like a generation shift, isn't it? Really, when it comes to popular culture, that period of time seems to be really important in terms of developing.
For sure, and then obviously after the whole hip hop explosion, then there was the whole acid house thing as well. You know, so I lived through two major cultural explosions, which were equally as influential on me, you know. So I feel very, very blessed. Really, I do. I look at young people now, and think, bloody hell, you know. I'm sure there are lots of underground. I know, you know, young people are out there doing things. So I'm not going to be down on young people because I know they are doing things. It's very easy to say, oh, they're just sitting around playing computer games and not doing stuff. But there are people out there making new forms of music and doing stuff. So.
You know, I think graffiti was often seen as the visual representation of that culture, that whole thing, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I suppose
yeah.
That's when you look at something like Subway Art by Martha Cooper, Henry Trolfont, it sort of gave a voice to that a little bit. And I heard that, you know, that book wasn't very... I think it was a flop when it came out, and it was only passed around word of mouth, so people would photocopy it would get sent around the world, and that's how people would actually access that, and people were looking at torn photocopies of his work and thinking, wow.
You know, for me as an artist, you know, I literally probably copied every single piece in that book, and that's where most of us Europeans, as we were then, had basically learned how to do letters, you know, by copying and emulating and then developing our own styles after that. And that's what we all did, you know. So I've actually I remember doing, it was like a roll of paper, lined paper, like a train, and I copied every single. I think, hopefully it's probably still somewhere. My mum's still got it. It's rolled up. It's probably about that fat. And it's all the train panels from that book. And I did them in felt tip, copied it in felt tip pens.
And did you know who you were being inspired by that? Did you recognise the artists? Did you know who they were, or were you just like...
No, because I was still very, very young. So the thought of even going to New York or meeting these people was completely alien. You know, we were very insular in where we lived. Even in London, you just stayed in South London. So it was... So I wasn't aware of who they were at all. No, it's only now... In my career now, I'm actually getting to meet some of these legends, which now it's like, oh my God, it's like crazy. I'm still completely starstruck. So,
what happens when you meet them? Are you like?
Well, yeah, it's kind of like, oh my God, and then they end up being really cool and down to earth, and I'm like,
do they know who you are?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go into actual incidents, but yeah, it happened this year. I was doing a mural in the Bronx, and I was painting alongside some of my heroes, you know, and they were like, yeah, I know your work, man. And for me, I was like, I'd just give up now, I'd be done. If I wanted to this would be the point where I could actually just give up now and I'd be content. I know that sounds a bit much, but that's how I felt, you know.
Well, that's pretty impressive. I mean, you know, to grow up looking at someone's work, to be inspired by them, to copy their their tags and stuff, and then actually meet them, and not only meet them, but having them recognise what you do.
Yeah, exactly. That's the ultimate. It really is.
I suppose that's the thing with social media, isn't it? And how your art can now just move around the world so easily.
Exactly. Yeah. It's accessible by anybody, anywhere.
So you started with your letters. And
yeah.
And there's obviously the work that I think you're probably best known for now is portraiture work. It's portraiture with a mix of abstract, I would say. We're in your studio at the moment, and I'm looking at some giant, lovely pieces. So tell me about how that evolved and how it came to be that you're doing the style that you're doing now.
So my style that you see now took a lot of work and evolution. So, and I'd probably say only really happened maybe 10 years ago now. And basically, you know, even back in the letter days, I was always trying to do something a little bit different, you know. So I was always trying to be unique, because it was one of the most important things in graffiti was being original, not biting, which is copying. So I've always been trying to push the boundaries a bit. You know, I was doing a lot of the letters with a lot of symmetry and stuff back in the days, which that influenced this with the symmetry and stuff. You can still see now. You've got to remember, back in the days, you could only do graffiti illegally. It wasn't an art form. The only place I could practice was the streets and the trains and stuff. So after getting in trouble quite a lot, I had to give it up for a bit. And then I went to art college, and that's where I started messing around with different art forms. Printmaking, painting, and I've always been a lover of abstract art. I started doing a lot of abstract paintings, had a couple of shows in London at quite a young age, which is purely abstract work. Not a lot of people know, but my roots are in abstract, you know, really. And that's my main kind of love, really, and probably something that I will go back to. But as I say, you've already identified, you can see that. People who know, they know, you can see it. And then obviously, I got back into doing letters again a little bit later, after a bit of a break when I was just solely painting. So I've always been doing art, but I stopped doing graffiti probably about 5 or 6 years. I was still using spray paint, but I wasn't doing the lettering. Then I got back into doing the lettering, and then I just started combining everything together. Everything I'd learned over the years, all my experiences, just started merging them all together. And then, you know, I'd never really done portraits before, but I was always fascinated by portraits. So I started messing around with the portraits, but with the kind of graffiti abstract backgrounds. I remember when I did my first, I was kind of brave enough to do it on hoardings in Shoreditch. And I remember there was another graffiti artist came up to me and he went, "Wow, I've never seen anything like that." He goes, "You need to, you know, keep on doing what you're doing."
What sort of...
So this is probably about 10 years ago, yeah. And then literally I just went crazy. And I was just painting on the streets in Shoreditch probably about twice a week, developing my style, and it just happened from there.
And how did you get the inspiration for the portraits? Who are you painting?
Well, I always went, because I'd seen a lot of people were doing the kind of stereotypical white French girls, you know, prints. So I thought, you know what, didn't really resonate with me, because I was kind of from hip hop, I was from South London. I was used to seeing people of difference, you know. So I wanted to represent mainly black women in my portraits. You know, I listen to black music. I've got a mixed race family. I thought that's more important to me. Plus, it was different, and I like the features. I like the strong features. I find black women more beautiful. So that I started doing that, and that again made it more unique as well. And then once you start looking at faces, you become obsessed, because, you know, you're looking at all the kind of shapes and the curves and stuff like that, and so you end up even talking to people, you end up just staring at them while you're analysing their faces. Because obviously what I do is I break down the face into, you know, kind of like into my own kind of shapes and forms and stuff. I'm still fascinated by portraits, you know. So
do you ever meet anyone and think, actually, you know, you'll be perfect for a portrait?
I do, but and I have done a few photo shoots myself, but I'm not a great photographer. You know, you can't be good at everything. Most of the time, I actually work with professional photographers for the image. I like to work from really, really high resolution images with really good lighting and stuff, so you can get the 3D element. So there's a lot of guys. I kind of, you know, hit them up on Instagram, whatever, and then we just it's like collaborating, and they're really happy. They love it when I do an interpretation of their pictures. Obviously, I tag them in, we share it mutually, and it's a cool thing. I mean, because that's the photograph is the first inspiration.
But do you always choose the model, or would you see something on like a photographer's feed, or you'd send a photographer to take a picture of a model? How would that work? I mean, I look through a lot of stuff, you know. Also, I license a lot of images. It's not based on the model; it's just based on that picture. An interesting angle. None of them are kind of straight on. They're kind of different kind of poses, different angles. I'm not doing a conventional portrait, so I'm looking for something which has a feeling, and something which I know I can work with, because obviously I showed you the reference image and they become completely different. I'm not copying the photograph in any way. It's just an inspiration. When I've got that image, I then make it my own creation, and also the model as well, that they become their own being, you know, almost. It takes another different energy completely.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. But it's just a starting point. every artist has to have some sort of starting point. And that's all I have is the photograph. I don't plan out any of the colours, any of the backgrounds, or any of the extra bits, any of the extra kind of energies and elements that I add in. It's all freestyle. It's all spontaneous. So, but I have to have something to start with, and then the rest of it is an adventure.
And then it just emerges,
then
right?
It just emerges, and it's an adventure. It's just like getting lost in the world. You're creating a world in your head, and that's what makes it fun. You know, I've never understood people who design everything to the colour and then just go to the wall and paint it. That always just seemed like a job to me. It seemed a bit boring.
So how do you do that? you must get into like a flow then. So when you're actually creating the work, so I've got a couple of amazing canvases around us at the moment, and you're in this sort of space. I mean, do you need a set environment to work in? Are you got music on? Are you just like in the zone? How does that work?
Well, yeah, obviously. So you've hit on music is obviously very, very important. I can't paint without music. So when I'm in the studio, I've always got the music on, you know, and you just get lost in it, you know. So when you're on the bigger walls, it's a bit more difficult to focus sometimes, especially if you're, you know,
you're up and down.
You're up 100 foot over a main road in central London or something like that. You know, there's a lot more things going on that you have to kind of, you know, be aware of. So there's a lot more distractions, but still, you have to have that ability to just get into your head and get in the zone. Yeah. And obviously, you know, with the bigger walls, it can be quite stressful. Just like even just getting to the wall, you know. So it can be really challenging to get that flow working, you know.
Is it quite meditative?
For me, yes, definitely. When you're in that zone, it's great. You get, you know, time just flies. You not even aware of time. You know, you're in that moment. You know, you're doing what you love. But obviously, the flip can be very, very stressful when you can't quite click. Things aren't quite working. You know, it can be quite exhausting. Yeah,
especially I suppose if you're on a wall and you're up against a time pressure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which you are most of the time.
Well, of course. You mean you've only got a certain amount of time for the hire of a scaffold or whatever.
You're always aware of that, you know, and then you're aware of this. If you're in this country, you're aware of the weather. It can change at any point, and all these kind of things which are there to test you.
So tell me about the the works themselves. You know, in terms of constructing, you told me that you go into, you've got the base image that you use as a starting point, if you like, and then you thought of freestyling. But what are you bringing into the freestyle? I mean, are you bringing in graffiti influences to that freestyle, and how are you bringing the abstract? What are you doing with it?
Obviously, there's a very, very strong graffiti influence in all of my work, you know, which anyone who knows graffiti or who's a graffiti writer can see straight away with the use of the colours, you know. So I use a lot of contrasting colours, you know, which shouldn't normally kind of work well together. And that's because, I like the challenge of making, you know, kind of pinks and like oranges, which just should not work together. I like the challenge of making them work. That's a skill in itself. Many people, if they've used those colours, it'd look awful, you know, it'd look like sick. But so that is a skill, again, something you learn over time, is how to use colour. So, and also with back in the days, obviously we didn't have this amazing colour range that you have now with like 250 colours or whatever.
But you had to find what you could
get. Right? Yeah, exactly. So we had to work with what we got, you know. So you learn how to put those colour combinations together. So that's something I learned from graffiti, and that's something I still like to do. There's lots of little effects. I'll do lots of shines and glows, which are kind of traditional graffiti effects, you know. So my work's got lots of these kind of glows and wispy kind of effects, you know, which again I learned through painting in legal walls and on the streets, you know, doing graffiti. And then obviously the abstractness is basically the composition. Learning how to do quite a busy piece, but then still keeping that balance with it all. That's really tough as well. And that's where your kind of abstract kind of skills come in. Is getting the balance of the shapes and everything, getting the composition working. You know, especially if it's a busy piece.
Well, there's so much in it, isn't there? I suppose that in every piece there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
And to say that there's a lot of influences going into that moment of creation, but it is so immediate. How do you know when it's done? How do you?
That's one of the toughest things.
Is it ever done?
Yeah, it is. But you know that again, that's something which most artists have struggled with for years is knowing when to stop, and the amount of pieces that I've ruined and you know, because you just didn't stop. I don't do it that much now because I've kind of learned to say, right, stop, that's it, enough. But so again, it's just something you learn. It's an instinctive thing, which after maybe 20 years of painting, you just instinctively know when your piece is done. But it's a struggle that you've got to go through. You know, there's no app for that.
I suppose there is. Yeah.
Is my artwork finished.com. You know, you just got to feel it. You just know. How do people? I mean, you obviously they respond very well to your work, but on the street when you've got the big murals, how do people generally respond to them? A lot of the time, people. What I love seeing, you know, that's what's great about being on the street is I love seeing people, you know, literally get stopped in their tracks and kind of just get lost in looking at it and see them get taken away to another place. That's why I paint. You know, I want people to be kind of transported to this kind of futuristic world and just get lost in the artwork and the depth and the layers and to forget about all of the craziness of the world right now, you know, which is escapism. It's always been escapism art for me. I suppose that's what I try and create with my work, you know. I suppose it is quite escape. You know, you can see people escaping, you know, just looking at all the flows and the shapes and the colours. But you use the word futuristic there, and I suppose now that I'm looking at it, and maybe I should have seen this before. I probably have seen it before, but there's a bit of a robotic element as well, down. Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Is that something you're thinking about? This? Yeah, I mean, again, that goes. Yeah, of course. I'm almost creating this kind of future race, you know, where it's not about, you know, skin colour or about, you know, where you're from. It's like this kind of ideal kind of, you know, race, utopian kind of society and place. That's what I'm kind of creating these kind of future worlds like that, you know, which is full of just joy and music and positivity, you know. That's I'm trying to do that, you know. So is that an intentional thing then? That yeah, it definitely is. It definitely is, and that links again to how I feel when I'm listening to music. You know, that music takes me to that place. So I want my art to do that as well. So yeah, it's an intentional thing, and the futuristic thing links again back to the graffiti, because we're looking at a lot of futuristic comics and stuff back then, you know, and was it 2000 AE? That yeah, sort of exactly. All of these kind of things. They're always about these future worlds. So there's always been a link to this kind of fantasy future with characters and with comic books and with hip hop as well. And I listen to a lot of electronic music, you know, which is quite futuristic as well. A lot of new electro and kind of a lot of kind of Detroit techno and stuff, which is futuristic also. So there's that link. Funny, now that you see it, you can't unsee it. Yeah, yeah. So of course, and that's where the technology with the kind of AR and all the NFT kind of stuff. Of course, because you've done quite a bit of the yeah, and that's where that kind of links really nicely with what I do. You know, and that's something which I'm going to be exploring and developing a lot more. When did you first start experimenting with the? Well, is it alternate reality? Is that what they call it? Yeah. So yeah. So the AR, augmented reality. Augmented. Sorry, I always get that confused. Augmented reality. So I've got quite a few filters on my Instagram of prints that I've done, which are also in my book as well. So actually, you know, the images in my book, there's a QR code, and you can see they animate. But I must say now, I'm not very great with computers, so it's not actually me doing the animation. Just people think I'm an absolute genius or something. It's not actually me doing it. But obviously the ideas are mine. But I'm not. I'm old school. We didn't use computers much back in my day. So, me neither. So you know, it's. I'd love to be able to do it myself, and I'd love to have the time to be able to do it myself, but I don't. But I've got a really great animator I work with. It's something that I'm going to be developing a lot more. I'm going to have my first NFT collection drop in this year, where you're going to see my pieces literally, you know, come to life, and you're going to be able to go into them. Which is, you know, if you're looking at the layers now in person, you can imagine that. You can actually walk through the layers. Yeah, exactly. So there's so many possibilities with my work. It's really exciting. And you mentioned the book earlier. Tell me about the book and how did that come about? Well,
I mean, again,
it's been pretty stressful. If anyone's thinking about doing a book,
I can imagine. But I'm just thinking this 8-year-old kid that we were talking about right at the beginning, and now he's going.
I mean, I've always thought, I'm not ready to do a book. I'm not ready to do a book. And then last year, I just had it. Oh, why not? You know, I've literally been painting so hard for the last, especially the last 5 years, but probably my whole life I've been working hard. But the last 5 years, I've been quite prolific. You know, so I thought. I was looking back at the stuff I'd done, my portfolio. I was like, wow, there's so much work here. I thought, why not document it? I kind of thought I'm at a stage where I think it's okay. There's nothing worse than an artist who just started out and brings out a book. You know, it's like, come on, man, you've got to earn your stripes. You know, you've got to. That's what I think, anyway.
I agree.
You know, so I was kind of at the point where it wasn't meant to be anything big anyway. It's a volume 1, by the way. It's not like I'm not ready to do. It's not like a life, retrospective or whatever. It's just like the kind of selected works from the last 5 years. Yeah, and then I just started the project, and then it was like, oh my god, it was only meant to be my drawings, my black and white work, and then it was like just turned into something much bigger. And it's been quite a stressful journey. So it's literally, it's out now. There's a few copies left because it's only a very limited edition book. It's not something you're going to be able to buy in Waterstones, put it that way. I think there's only 100 copies.
Oh right, so it's like a limited release,
a very limited edition thing, and that's how I want my work to be. You're not going to see my work in the high street, unless someone's stolen an image. I prefer my work to be for collectors and a bit more exclusive. That's the way I like it.
Sounds exciting what you're doing.
Yeah.
Are you excited about where things are starting to go?
Yeah, definitely. You have to keep, as I say, you kind of. It's tough now because you have to be like as an artist, you've got to be a businessman and an artist. You've got to have so many different hats. Now, you've got to be a content creator, social media expert. It's tough. So you've got to be excited. You've got to try and do cool things. But at the same time, it's easy to get despondent with it, and it's easy to build yourself up too much and get disappointed. It's very, very, very tough. Emotional journey being an artist,
So it's that balance you were talking about, balance not only in terms of the works that you're doing, but balance in terms of how you live your life and how you mix the art with real life.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many things, and I look back at when I first started out, and I really, really struggled. I remember when I was talking, earlier about when I was doing my abstract stuff. I remember I had a show where I was kind of doing stuff which was very forward thinking. It was almost too forward thinking. I was doing kind of stencil based stuff mixed with abstract stuff. So I was kind of already fusing styles together. And this was like early 2000s. I did an exhibition in Shoreditch well before this whole street art kind of boom thing, and didn't sell one piece, and everyone was like, oh, it's lovely, but we can't work out, what are you, what are you, a graffiti artist, an illustrator? And I was like, I'm neither, I'm both. Then all of a sudden, fast forward 5 years, it's trendy to be both. So I was always a bit ahead of the pack, and that really, having an exhibition experience like that where you don't sell a thing, that can really affect you. And after that, I was like, I'm not going to do another show for like 10 years, and so it can really knock your confidence. So I've been on quite a journey.
Well, what a route you've been on. I mean, I suppose you look back now and you can see all those staging points in your life. It's led to where you are now, though, I suppose. And you think, oh gosh, if that hadn't happened,
Yeah, exactly. But it's it's quite an emotional journey for sure. But you still have to keep working, obviously. That's
you've got to keep going, haven't you? I think
that's the thing.
You've got to keep going. You've got to keep creating. You've got to keep trying to. I mean, even what you're saying about augmented reality and things like, you've got to keep on NFTs, keep trying different things, going into different audiences as well. Perhaps.
Exactly. You've always got to keep moving, keep developing. You can't just get your style and then that's it. You've always got to keep challenging yourself, and that can be just as tricky. Working up to the point where you're established, but then you've got to keep on. People want to see developments. They still want to see you moving and changing, and that's the next challenge. And that's the stage I'm at now. So there's certain things I've achieved. Now I'm trying to step it up again. So we'll see. Especially when you get older as well. especially when you talk about the big murals, it's very, very physical.
Physical, hard work, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
It's graft.
You
People
know,
don't realise it.
Exactly.
How is your back and your arms?
Well, exactly. They're all starting to go a bit. So, you've got to start looking after yourself a bit better. And so there's always a challenge. It's never comfortable. And if it is comfortable, then I think if you feel that contentment in everything you do, then I think you're kind of done, really. I think
you're not feeling the spark.
It's like hang up your boots, kind of at the end of the road. You've always got to have that drive. Once you lose that drive and think, I've done everything, I'm just going to sell a few prints of old works. And, that's just,
Yeah.
Maybe when you're 80.
But not now. Not now.
Not now. No, definitely not.
We'll leave it there. Mr Cenz, thank you very much for speaking to Art-Related Noise.
Yeah, that's been good. Yeah, nice to see you again.
If you enjoyed this episode of Art-Related Noise, be sure to check out our other podcasts featuring artists from the Enter Gallery in Brighton.